Hello and welcome back to another episode of CamBro Conversations. And today's conversation, we are talking about masculinity and the men's mental health crisis. To do so, we are joined by Neil Smedley, business owner of Koby Barbers and a thought leader in the men's mental health space. Neil, thanks for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Excited to have you on. And I was telling you before we started rolling that when I hit the kind of milestone of 50 episodes, I asked my audience, who do you want to hear from? And there were a number of guys stepped forward and suggested yourself. And from there, I started binging your content that was available on YouTube. And I resonated really strongly with your message, not from having some of the same experiences, which I'm sure we'll go into, but from that mindset and the way that you put a way forward for males in this particularly challenging period, but also in this society where masculinity has maybe got these negative connotations. You are a voice for a positive interpretation of that. So first of all, thank you for that, Neil. And for those listeners that haven't encountered you before, can you give us a little bit of a background, please?
Yeah, well, I turned 40 this year. Which doesn't seem like a big deal to many people, but I guess for any guy that's approaching that age, it is a big deal. It's a time when you kind of start reflecting on the the previous 20 years and whether you are where you want to be. I own a shop called King Koby, so we have 3 stores. We have a clothing range. We've been going for 10 years. That's a brand that's named after my son. It's built very much on an ethos. It's not just there for the sole purpose of making money. All that's important too. I grew up working class. I have a brother, Leroy. He's 18 months younger than me. We grew up incredibly poor. I don't say that as some kind of poverty pornography. I mean, we were on the breadline. We were poor people, incredibly poor people. My mum and dad worked 4 jobs between them, 4 cleaning jobs. My father couldn't read or write until he was 29. It was my mum, ironically, that taught him to read and write. And I guess one of the success stories of that was that my mum and dad managed to claw their way from being incredibly poor into the lower part of the middle classes and eventually buy their council house. And ironically, my father, when me and my brother were both in our infancy, he was a cleaner at the police station. And 15 years later, he would go on to be a police officer at the same police station he used to clean. So I was raised Mormon, so I had an incredibly religious background. For anyone that knows Mormonism, it's not just you turn up on a Sunday sort of thing. It's a lifestyle, it's a culture, it's everything. Everything you do is dictated to by the faith. I mean everything. The films you watch, the clothes you wear, the things you say, the girls you date, the people you will marry and won't marry. So I was raised in that. I left the Mormon church officially when I was in kind of my early 30s. I've been married twice. Married once when I was 19. No 19-year-old should get married. I learned that lesson. I was far too young.
Was that a religious marriage, Neil?
Yeah, do you know what it was? And it wasn't an arranged marriage. We don't have arranged marriages in Mormonism. What we do have, and again, you don't realize this at the time until you look back as an older man, is that there is an innate pressure to become married within Mormonism. And especially for the girls. If you get to 22, 23 and you're not married, people start asking questions. And there's no sex before marriage, so let's not pretend that wasn't a big influencer as well. I wanted to get laid, so and I wouldn't say I wasn't in love, because I was, but no 19-year-old in the world is ready for marriage at 19. Nobody is, and we went into that, and obviously we couldn't make it work, and we divorced 2 years later. I got married again when I was 29 to a girl called Jodie. We had 2 children together. We're currently midway through a divorce now. And that's pretty much where I'm at now. I had in many ways a happy childhood, in many ways a tragic childhood, as I suppose a lot of people did. Some people had it worse than me, some people had it better than me. But my childhood, at the least, was very, very unique. And the qualities that my parents taught me were very, very unique. We were raised on Bob Dylan and Martin Luther King and Shakespeare, and 8 and 9, me and my brother were kind of forced to memorize Martin Luther King speeches and repeat them back. And so we were introduced to very adult themes very, very early on in our childhood, which now has stood us in good stead. So that's a brief overview.
Given how articulate you are, and I know you've spoken before about that was almost a dangerous thing when you were younger, your ability to be so precise with your words and maybe influential. Do you think a lot of that was shaped by your religious upbringing?
Yeah, definitely. And again, one of the good things that Mormonism does, so the biggest public fear that anybody has is public speaking. Sorry, the biggest fear is public speaking. And ironically, if you are a good public speaker, it's a superpower. Articulation and the ability to speak in front of a crowd is an absolute superpower. It's not something we teach in schools, and we should. And thankfully, one of the facets of Mormonism was from the time you were 5 years old, you would have to speak in front of a congregation. That was it. Tough. You spoke in front of a congregation. So by the time you got to 12 or 13, you were very comfortable speaking in front of 300, 400, 500 people, and that was a superpower. It really was. And then because of the men and the literature that my father exposed me to, I mean, I remember road trip. We lived in Scarborough. I remember having road trips to Leeds where my dad would play Bob Dylan songs. I don't have to familiar you are with Bob Dylan, but he would play Bob Dylan songs and Leonard Cohen songs and Johnny Cash songs. Yeah. And every time 2 lines went by, he would press the pause button and then say, "What do you think he meant by that?" I was 9. He was asking me to interpret these words written by geniuses, So we were encouraged constantly to think, constantly. And that's the greatest gift that my father ever gave me. He wasn't too concerned with formal education. I wasn't too concerned with formal education. I'm the same with my children now. I think formal education is the most overrated commodity in the world. But yeah, we were forced to think. But to go back to your original point, you're absolutely right. The more articulate you are, the more self-aware you are, it's a superpower, and it's also something that can be used for malevolence.
In what ways do you think you maybe misused that during your early years?
I use it to hide responsibility.
Okay.
I'm just to give you an example. When I was, I had a girlfriend, I was very close to in my sort of, in my mid-20s. And at that point in my life, I had a 10-year period basically when I was self-destructing. And I spent 10 or 15 years just self-destructing. That's what I was doing. I was able to get away with that because I looked a certain way and I could speak a certain way, but I was self-destructing. And anybody that ever called me out on that, I could cleverly come up with an argument as to why that was. And it was just cowardice. It's like, no, you don't understand. I went through this and I went through that. And if you look at it this way, I knew my argument was bullshit, but I knew that they weren't smart enough to know it was bullshit. It's that famous line. I mean, I don't know if you watch the Joe Rogan podcast, but there's a famous line in the Joe Rogan podcast when he's speaking to a doctor very early on when he started the podcast. And this doctor's talking about this pill that he's discovered that stops hangovers. And Joe Rogan looks at him and says, "I wish I knew enough about this topic to call you out on your bullshit." So innately, he knew it was bullshit, but he's like, "I don't know enough to call you out on it." And I knew that. And I used it to divert responsibility away from myself.
You've used the term cowardice there, and I know you've spoken about that previously. What was it about yourself that you felt you were a coward, and in what way?
I didn't take responsibility for my actions.
Okay.
That's the ultimate definition of a coward. You've got to reach a point, and again, I think the reason that this society and masculinity is in the mess that it is in now is because we don't actively teach responsibility. What we teach is it's understandable you are the way you are because of the horrors you've suffered, and the reality is that that's not true. I didn't take responsibility for my actions. I used my actions to justify causing other people pain, and that's cowardly. To do that is cowardly. I would do things that I knew were wrong and be so manipulative and clever with my words that I would actually be able to convince them that what they had done was wrong, and the way they treated me. And it's, when I look back at it now, it's shameful and it makes me cringe. It's horrific, but it's the ultimate mark of a coward. That's what a coward is. And the reality is, we're all cowards. It's what people don't understand. We are all cowards. The only difference is what we do with the fear that we have of being a coward. That's it. The only difference between the hero and the coward is what they do. They both feel the same thing. Both fighters, before that final bell, they both feel the same fear. Both people that leave their job and jump into an entrepreneurial pursuit, they both feel the same fear. We're all cowards. Some people just choose to justify that cowardly position, and some people just choose to say, "No, fuck you. I won't be a coward today."
Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from, Neil, because like you say, it's almost an innate human nature for us to fear the unknown or the unpleasant or a level of uncertainty, like you say, leaving a certain job to be an entrepreneur. Of course, there's a level of fear. Getting into the boxing ring, I've heard you speak before about sports as well. So certain elements of kind of physical sports, of course, there's an element of fear until you've done it. How did you start to be honest with yourself then, with regards to, like you say, you were maybe using excuses or past experience or trauma to justify behavior which wasn't becoming of the man that you wanted to be?
It was a slow process, to be honest. And the one thing, the difficult thing for me, or at least the difficult thing at the time, is that I had no place to hide. It wasn't as if I wasn't aware of this and there was a light bulb moment that made me change. So I didn't even have the luxury of hiding behind ignorance. I knew, like, from being 13, 14, I knew, I have never, ever, ever, sorry, too much coffee. I have never, ever been in a situation, ever, where I did not know what the right thing to do was.
Right.
Never. And anytime I chose not to do the right thing, it's because I was a fucking coward. And I believe that to be true of most people. So two things happened. One, the birth of my son, which excited me and terrified me. And the terrifying thing about that is that still wasn't enough to actually complete the change. It began the change, but it wasn't enough to complete the change. That's a terrifying thing to admit. And then my mum died. My mum died 6 years ago, so almost 7 years ago. And I'm a mummy's boy. Don't let the face tattoos fool you. I'm a mummy's boy. My mum was my best friend. She was my confidant. She was the only person ever, I believe, that's ever truly had my back. And that was my first brush with mortality. And the thing that I find so curious about all of us is that we all know we're going to die. It's one thing that makes us unique as human beings. We know from being 5 or 6, we will die. Nobody believes it. Nobody believes it. Well, here I am, sat in a hospital wet room. I've just been told by the brain surgeon that there's nothing they can do. They should be kept on a life support machine, and then they'll turn that machine off in 24 hours. And I'm sat there, and I'm 35 years old. I have a wife. I'm involved in a marriage that isn't going particularly well.
Yeah.
I'm not honouring my responsibilities as a father, as a husband, as a business owner. I'm not all in on anything. And I literally felt in that moment, I felt a wave, a very real, visceral wave of absolute repulsion and disgust at the person that I had become and allowed myself to become. And I have a theory about this, and I've done podcasts where people kick back against this theory, and it's but for me it seems pretty soundproof. Is that I don't think anybody ever changes anything in their life ever until you reach a point where you are literally disgusted and repulsed at either the person you've become or the things that you have allowed to happen. It's the only way that real lasting change can happen. And we've built a society that protects you from feeling disgust and repulsion about yourself.
I think a level of honesty with yourself, which comes from the level of disgust which you felt, can absolutely be a driver for real positive change in your life. And I think you give a good example there in terms of, like you say, you looked in the mirror and you thought, this is just not me. This is not who I should be. This is not how I should be. And that level of disgust, like you say, is a big driver of deciding that you're going to make these positive changes. What were some of the positive changes that you decided to make as a man?
A commitment to the truth.
Okay.
Was the first one. Is that I wasn't a truthful person. And by that, I don't mean, people get this confused. I don't mean that you couldn't ask me a question and trust me to tell you the answer, because you could. And I don't mean that you couldn't ask me to do you a favor and I wouldn't do it, because I would. So in that respect, I was a trustful person. I would do the things that I said that I would do. But I wasn't honest with myself. I had built up this business which looked very successful from the outside. I had a traditionally attractive wife. I drove a £60,000 car. I had a beautiful son. I still have a beautiful son. Lived in a beautiful house. And there was this illusion there of success. And the people around me and closest to me would tell me all the time, what you've got is amazing, look how lucky, blah, blah, blah. And I knew that it was just a veneer, because I knew there was more in me. And what happens at that point, then you get some people that, and you see this all the time, and Instagram is a perfect example of this. You get some people that are happy enough that they've managed to convince you that the veneer is real. Okay, and you can stay there. And then you get people like me who say, no, I actually want to be what I appear to be. I want to be what I appear to be. It's not enough for me for the veneer. So I made a decision to go all in and go, well, who are you really? What are you really capable of? And actually, you know what? It's quite exciting because you've managed to achieve quite a lot on very little effort.
Yeah.
So how about you go all in on who you are?
In terms of realizing your potential, that, like you say, it was quite a big carrot, isn't it? Like you say, you've accomplished an awful lot without ever operating as the man that you thought you could be. So imagine what you could achieve if you were true to your intentions and true to your values. What were some of the selfish decisions you were making beforehand that were stopping you from being happy with the man you looked at in the mirror?
I was lazy.
Okay.
I was lazy. It's that simple. I was lazy. And you know, that seems like a trite word, but it's everything, especially when you're talking about integrity and character, and especially when you're talking about masculinity. I was lazy because you don't get to be lazy. It's not okay to be a loser. It's not okay to be weak, and it's not okay to be lazy. And I was a loser, and I was weak, and I was lazy. And those things are not okay. And they're especially not okay when you're a husband, and they're especially not okay when you're a father, and they're especially not okay when you're employing people, because there is a network of people that are relying on you. And how fucking dare you be so arrogant as to be lazy and weak and a loser when so many people rely on you? You know, that makes you a monster. Again, these are words we don't want to use. You know, I believe fully in getting back to a level of honesty that is brutal. I don't think you can ever change anything unless I don't believe in honesty. I believe in brutal honesty, you know, because that's what changes people. And I had to look at myself and say, yeah, why? Why is the fact that I'm a father still not enough for me to go on? And these are terrifying things to admit, because I'm a good dad and I love my son. I adore my son. I would die for my son. You know, I adore him and I adore my daughter, but I wasn't living for them. And people will make grand claims, I would die for my children. It's like, no, fuck you, you coward. These people need you to live for them. You know, and I wasn't doing that. It's a big difference, you know, and it takes a huge amount of humility, and it's humility that I didn't have as a younger man, to admit that. And nobody wants to admit that you're not quite the father you could be. You're not quite the employee you could be. You're not quite the husband you can be. And actually, you being less than you could be is having a dramatic effect on the people you claim to love the most. So you better be really careful about who you claim to love.
Yeah, I'm always struck by how articulate you are when you discuss such hard-hitting topics. Like you say, in terms of the language that you're using is so evocative of negative emotions about yourself or about who you were, in terms of monster, lazy. And I think that links back, like you say, you do have a joined up theory on this, where being disgusted and evoking that level of emotion about who you are is the only way to drive positive change for you as a man. And I take it, I guess through King Koby, you're giving a lot of the kind of male employees that you've got maybe a similar mindset through discussions with them. How do they take to a theory like that?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that I have that kind of relationship to, you know, they listen to the podcast and they've been part of the Guardian stuff, and they agree with it, and they agree with it, and I think they agree with it for the same reasons that I agree with it. And I think so. Just to give you some context, I'm not interested in opinions, and that includes my own. Okay, so and I mean the biggest proof I can give you of that is that for 30 years, my entire foundation for life and belief was built upon Mormonism.
Yeah.
To leave that left me in an emotional and psychological chaos. I don't know who I was. I thought that I knew what truth was. I thought I knew what the purpose of life was. All of a sudden, I'm 30 and I realize it's not true. Okay, so I'm a man that's more than willing to change his opinions. So I don't care about my opinion. I don't care about your opinion. I don't care about, you know, I care about what's true. So my starting place is, right, before we get into opinions, let's see if we can find a base of what's true, and then we can build from there. And when I talk the way that I talk, I say these things not to be provocative and not because it's my opinion. I say them because I believe them to be objectively true. And even as of yet, I have not heard anyone give me a sound argument against that rhetoric. And there are examples everywhere in the psychological community and in the real world that's just how we work. You know, you know this. You'll meet people who have been overweight for 15 years.
Yeah.
You go from diet to diet to diet to diet, from Weight Watchers to Weight Watchers. Or they've been trying to quit smoking for 15 years. You know, it's like, well, I wish I could lose weight. I wish I could stop smoking. You're not disgusted. You're not repulsed.
Yeah.
Because if you did, you would change. What you mean is you hope, you wish. The whole dreams of your existence, you've pinned them on a wish. And we all wish. I wish I looked better naked. I wish I was a millionaire. I wish I had a bigger business. You know, I wish I had a better relationship with my wife. Okay, well, the reason these things are wishes and not reality is because you don't want them enough. And in order to want something enough, you have to be so disgusted at where you currently are. Yeah. And we live in a society that literally tells you that's wrong. Self-love, self-care, you're enough, you're beautiful. These memes I see on Instagram, don't chase anything. Whatever was meant for you will come for you. You know, these things are just so dangerous to tell people. And it's such bullshit. So, all right, what's meant for me will come for me. Oh, okay, well, let's go to Syria and we'll just tell the refugees there not to worry. That what's coming for them is meant for them and the universe will provide. This is white middle-class bullshit armchair psychology. And it's led to the crisis that we currently find ourselves in now, where we have literally built up the weakest generation that mankind has ever known. And we're all complicit in it. And we all have blood on our hands on it. And we all voted for it. You know, and where are the leaders? Where's the leaders? Where's the men? Where are the people talking about any of these things? Nowhere. You know, the leaders now are all on Instagram getting their teeth whitened in Turkey, you know, and getting dot next to it. You know, fuck these guys. We have built up a very, very dangerous culture, you know, and I know that when people like me speak like this, it sounds extreme, but trust me, this will come back to haunt us 15 years from now.
I think people like yourself, Neil, need to put those thoughts out there for us to even move the needle slightly in the right direction. Because as you've said there, it's so far away from where we should be that it requires you to be, and I'm not saying your language is provocative, but it's strong emotional rhetoric, which makes us challenge how we think about ourselves. And that's important because if we don't challenge how we think about ourselves, then we're destined to continue down the same path, which, if you look at the statistics, and me and you can throw those around all day, but 70% of the suicides in the UK are men. So there's clearly a problem with how men are perceiving themselves and taking the ultimate route away from that. Yeah. And it's the biggest single cause in death of men under 35. You and I were riffing beforehand about the pandemic, and there's no point in us going too far into that at this point. But there is a massive crisis in male mental health, and you're putting forward the discussion that we have gone far too far in one direction when it comes to self-talk, self-love, let what's for you won't go past you and all that kind of stuff, in terms of like, oh, what will be. That is a pretty toxic mindset for a lot of men and how we're genetically built to behave and actually feel value in ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the interesting things is, and I think, you know, maybe you'll recognize this or not recognize this, is that every 6 to 12 months, there is some new social media, you know, social justice cause, whatever that may be, okay? And everybody jumps on the bandwagon. No matter what, it doesn't matter whether it's a just cause or not, but, you know, we go through these cycles, don't we? You know, when it's trans rights one month, and it's Black Lives Matter another month, and it's mental health another month, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, some girl who was famous for getting her tits out in Dubai is now a mental health advocate. And these are just things that people jump upon, and I forgot what the question was. What was the question? As soon as I said big tits, my mind went.
There we go, mate. Got excited. No, it's just like, well, for starters, what you said there, it's the insincerity of us going from one social justice cause to another, when really, if we had a genuine focus on mental health, we would be speaking about it properly at all times, or doing something proper to address it, I suppose.
Yes, and right. So there's a couple of things on that. One, we don't have a crisis of the suicide statistics have stayed relatively stable for the last 20 years, relatively stable. Another fact that people don't know, and again, if people doubt me, they're free to go and Google this, and this turns the entire thing on its head actually, is that men commit suicide more than women at a rate of almost 4 to 1. Women attempt suicide more than men at a rate of almost 3 to 1.
Right.
More women are attempting suicide than men. It's just that men are more aggressive. So men do it, men go through with it more, whilst women don't, okay? So these things have always been there. Now, when we talk about a suicide epidemic or a suicide pandemic, suicide is a symptom. Suicide is not the problem. What we have, and I put this on a message board the other day and got nothing but hell for it, but I think I can justify my position, is that we don't have a suicide epidemic. We have a weakness epidemic. That's what we have. We have a weakness epidemic. And we have built a culture that is so unbelievably weak and we have made masculinity into something that is toxic, and we have made courage into something that is toxic, and stoicism into something that is toxic, that we have built a generation of weakness. And it doesn't matter which way you look at it. That's, for me, that's what suicide is. And what happens? What do weak men do? Well, weak men make weak decisions, and weak decisions lead to weak life outcomes, and weak life outcomes lead to suicide. Suicide is a symptom, it is not the problem. The problem is that we have a generation of weak men, and that we've built a culture that not only allows that to happen, but celebrates it to happen. Weakness is not a virtue. Vulnerability is not a virtue. And we teach people that they are, and they're absolutely not. It's not okay. You know, it's okay not to be okay, is it? It's okay to be weak, is it? Is it? Really? Because if I have a weak knee, I go to the doctor and fix it. It's not okay to be weak. It's okay to recognize that you are weak.
Yep.
But it's not okay to be weak. You know, it's not a virtue.
I can understand so much of that, because as you said, you've put it into a physical example. And while you're not saying that it's not okay to be aware of weakness within your mind or your life choices, it is imperative on you to fix it. And I guess that's where I resonate a lot with what you're saying in terms of it's about addressing this weakness that you might be aware of. So you became aware that the man in the mirror wasn't the man that you wanted to be, that you were behaving like a coward. I've heard you say, quite frankly, and it really struck me, that your potential attempted suicide was an act of cowardice. And and that is incredibly self-aware, because of the kind of the weight and the magnitude of what that would have meant if that had happened. And for you to say then that it's about fixing yourself, I think rather than maybe some of the mental health advocates would say, oh, I can't believe you're saying it's not okay to be okay. What you're saying is acknowledge it, but fix it.
Yeah, it's okay to not, it's okay to not be okay, because I've been times in my life where I'm not okay. But I'll tell you what, it's not okay. It's not okay to be not okay in January and still not okay in December.
Yeah.
That's what's not okay. That's what's not okay. Because that is innately part of what masculinity is the ability to recognize your weakness and to heal yourself, and to know that your weakness innately, and this is indisputable, your weakness as a man has a knock-on effect to everybody around you. Everybody else suffers because of your weakness, you know, and it's not okay. And nobody else is responsible for your mental health. You know, I saw a post the other day from a close friend of mine, and don't get me wrong, these posts are well-intentioned, okay? I'm not criticizing their intentions, but again, this comes back to a deeper issue, in as much as we don't, as a society in general, we have absolutely abandoned the art form of critical thought. There is no critical thought anymore. There is none. Whatever the consensus is, that's the consensus. There's no critical thought. So this girl had put a post up about how the UK government had spent 3 times more fixing potholes than they had on mental health, and that this was unacceptable, and please sign this petition. You know, and then, you know, there was everybody else going, yeah, brilliant, amazing, well done, these clapping seals. It's like, who made you think the government was responsible for your mental health? And how do you think the government is going to fix your mental health? How do you think that works? It's this constant abandonment of responsibility. Somebody else come and fix me. Somebody else come and help me. Somebody else come and give me money. Like, you need to be responsible for you. And that's rule number one, in my opinion, of being a man. Now, that isn't to say that you should, I was in counseling for 2.5 years. These things are useful. They're useful, okay? But we've got to get away from this mindset that other people are going to come and save us. Because, and the reality is, and this is a brutal reality, and you learn it the older you get, no one gives a fuck. Nobody gives a fuck.
Yeah.
And that isn't because we're uncaring people. It's because our lives are so desperately difficult and brutal and hard and relentless that, yes, I care about you, but I can't care about you to the extent that I can help you, because my own life requires so much of my time and my attention, you know. And the older you become, the more you realize that, and the more you start to realize nobody's coming to save me. I need to find a way to save myself.
The key theme that screams at me throughout that entire theory or discussion that you're putting forward, Neil, is personal responsibility. And that is that you absolutely have to take responsibility for yourself. Yes, the government can put in place access to counseling or access to medication or access to doctors. So if it is your knee, you've got access to potential surgery or rehabilitative work, but you have to go away and put in the work afterwards. The same thing that you have to do for your mind and your head. Yeah. And by you saying that, I think there's so many people that will struggle to take that message on board at first. But ultimately, as you said, as you get older, you realize that, yes, people can have the best intentions around you. But ultimately, if you don't look after number one from a well-being perspective, nobody's going to do it for you, regardless of how much money gets spent on the mental health budget or on the potholes or whatever else people are trying to fix.
Yeah. Nobody's coming for you, and nor should they. Nor should anyone come for you. You're responsible for your own life. And if and I spent, well, how long was I? 7 years working in child and adolescent mental health services. Okay, so I was a counsellor in the NHS for 3 years with a mental health team. So I know what I'm talking about. And I was constantly in disagreement with my colleagues. Right? Because even then I was 22, so I'm 40 now. My views haven't changed. And I think that I've been proven to be right. Is that every time these problems occurred, these mental health problems, one, they weren't actually mental health problems. There's another thing that we've clung to. People want a diagnosis. I'm ADHD. I'm bipolar. Well, I have depression. Well, I have anxiety. Do you? Well, join the fucking queue, Sharon, because we all do. We all do. Your birthright as a human being is anxiety and depression, because we're all going to get sick. We're all going to die. Everybody we know is going to die. We're all going to go through hardships. Every morning I wake up, I've got to spend 10 minutes fighting my demons before I put my fucking jeans on. Okay? So this ownership of I am anxious, I am depressed, I have depression is another way of offsetting responsibility. It's almost like, oh, this is something that I have. It's not something I can do something about. So no. Having depression is not like having a brain tumor. You can't do anything about your brain tumor. Your depression, after a certain amount of time, becomes a choice. It becomes a choice. And because we have, and again, because, most people, I don't know if it's about everybody, but most people are fundamentally good, is that we want to be on the side of the supposed victim. So we want to always be the one that's there and supportive. And actually, I think that love and compassion, which should always be the starting point for any kind of relationship that's therapeutic, love and compassion, when taken to their final conclusion, are cancers. They're cancers. They are cancers. And you see that. Freud spoke about that. It's the oedipal mother. The mother that loves too much, that ends up destroying her son. Love and compassion are cancers when taken too far. There comes a point. If you're depressed after 15 years, fuck you. If you're still fat after 15 years, fuck you. Yeah. And it's harsh, but it's just real, because you either believe that you are an independent agent in control of your own life, or you don't. And listen to me, I understand that some people start from different positions. Some people have very abusive and fragmented childhoods that makes it very difficult for them to get ahead in life. Some people are born with a silver spoon. Some people have the advantages of two parents. Some people are raised by single parent families. I understand all of that. I understand it, okay? But it still doesn't take away your personal responsibility to get yourself from A to B. The life isn't fair. The game is rigged. The playing field is uneven. But I have no sympathy for anybody that has the same problems at 40 that they had at 20.
Yeah, I think it's such a powerful message in terms of taking responsibility for, regardless of the hand you're dealt, regardless of your access to the means of production, the means of education, the means of like safety and security, depending on how traumatic your upbringing was, or the society that you fell into. I think it's a message that people can scale, because I'm coming from an experience of not having this level of trauma, but still taking ultimate responsibility for my outcomes based on listening to people like you, Neil. And I think anyone listening to this that hasn't gone as far down the rabbit hole in terms of the levels of depression, the levels of anxiety that you can identify with, as Neil said, in terms of, I have depression, I have anxiety. You may have it now, but you can shift forward. You can move forward. You can get it under control. You can live a life that you decide to based on your actions. What are some of those actions, Neil, that you would advocate for men to take to make themselves more responsible for themselves and better in terms of how they feel?
Well, the first thing that you have to do is, and it's a difficult one, is that you have to absolutely rid yourself of every possible excuse that drips from your lips.
Yeah.
And the reality is that we all have them. You know, I have them. You know, I have those excuses. I have very real reasons not to do what I should do. And guess what? Sometimes I give in to them. And sometimes I'm weak. And sometimes I don't do what I should do. But if I have a commitment to ridding myself of those excuses, maybe I hit it 70% of the time. Well, before I was hitting it 40% of the time. Yeah. And it's a lot of success in life, whether it's personal or academic or entrepreneurial, is about playing the numbers. It's just about trying to be better. And it's cliched, but you know, you come and you set small goals, but you can't even do that unless you're prepared to accept responsibility. You have to be able to look at your life, and let's not make it complicated. Okay, let's break it right down. So look, I'm not an educated man. Okay, I have no GCSEs, I have no A levels, I didn't go to university, I don't have any academic qualifications whatsoever. Everything I know, I read from a book or I learned from brutal experience. Okay, so I'm not speaking from some lofty pace. So I've learned everything the hard way. I don't know of any man alive on the earth right now, including myself, who is a little bit more enlightened than other people are, just by you know, me being that way, that couldn't name 3 things right now that you could do or not do that would improve your life. You could name me 3 things right now. Start there. Give me 3 things. Give me 3 stupid things. I don't give a fuck if it's getting up at 5:30 in the morning. I don't care if you smoke less, if it's whatever it may be. You can think of 3 things right now. Yeah. And then you master that. And then for a month, you master those 3 things. And that literally changes the neuropsychology in your brain. It literally changes the way in which your brain fires. And then you go, fuck. It was an incredibly simple thing that I've done, but I still did it. I didn't realize that. Maybe I can put a finger out into the world. Maybe I could do something bigger than I thought that I could. You know, that's what bodybuilding is. I know a lot of bodybuilders. That's why bodybuilding is such a great sport for that. Because essentially what you're doing, the bodybuilding is irrelevant, and the picking the 3 things, getting up at 5:30 is irrelevant. What you're really doing is proving to yourself that you're capable of sacrifice. And that's what success is. How much can you sacrifice? And that's it. That's the secret to everything. How much can you sacrifice? How much can you endure? And you prove that to yourself in the smallest possible way to begin with. And it may be so small that it's embarrassing to you. But you do that every month for a year, and you're a different person. And then maybe you have the courage to go out there and speak a truth that's difficult. Then maybe you have the courage to say, like I do, say things that you know may be controversial. Then you have the courage to be disliked. And then before you know it, you wake up one morning and you have this sense like I had, where you go, I don't know what just happened, but I feel like my own man. I feel separate from the crowd now. I feel like an individual. I feel like I have freedom. I feel like a thinker. And all of that started with the simplest of things.
There's probably 2 key themes there that I'm going to pull out. The first of those is momentum. So by doing those small things, you gain momentum that I can do this, I can do that, I can do X, Y, and I can do Z. Therefore, I can do this further down the line. So you did these small things that reinforced your belief of who you were as a person each day, continuously. And then from there, like you say, you woke up one day and you felt, I'm my own man. I'm capable of whatever I want to. I'm capable of thinking about these things outside of the box. And the second thing, and very much linked to momentum, is those habits. So I'm a big fan of James Clear's Atomic Habits, and some of the language you're using there resonates a lot with that particular text. And each thing that you're doing is a vote for the person that you want to be tomorrow. So yes. For example, like you say, getting up at 5:30 is a vote for being a proactive person that's getting out there and doing what they need to do. Like you say, smoking less is a vote for being a healthier person tomorrow. And all these things that you do today are votes for further down the line. So if you're a depressed person, doing things that you previously found very hard or difficult to do from your mindset, doing those things lead to you being a person that is free of their depression tomorrow. Absolutely. Or further down the line.
No, absolutely. That's absolutely right. And the thing with this kind of advice is that because we live in an age now where we have too much information. again, that's something nobody speaks about. We are literally drowning in information. We are drowning in choice that we don't know what fucking way to turn. It's one of the big problems of our culture, and we haven't figured out how to deal with that yet. But in order to do what you just described there, you have to go back to my original point. You have to start from the premise that you're currently not enough.
Yep.
And people don't tell you that. Instagram doesn't tell you that. You're enough the way you are. Don't chase anybody, let them chase you. You're exactly where you're meant to be right now. Trust the universe. No, how about right now, you're a lazy motherfucker who's no use to anybody, and you're abandoning your dream, and you're less than you should be, and everyone around you is hurting from that. How about who you are now is wholly inadequate to face the future? And the only way that you do that vote for yourself tomorrow is to admit that who you are now is not currently sufficient. This version of me now is not sufficient to achieve the things that I want to achieve. And that's why I bring it all back again to brutal honesty. And brutal honesty is something that is looked down upon in this society. We want people to believe that they're okay the way they are. And I can't think of a more damaging thing to tell people, especially young people.
There's something I've been thinking about recently, Neil, and I guess I'll ask you, what is your biggest fear for yourself?
My biggest fear?
Yeah.
My biggest fear is mediocrity.
Yeah. I thought that was going to be the case because when I was asked, my answer on a recent podcast was not fulfilling my potential. I have no idea what that potential is, but would I not be horrified if I got to my deathbed and I looked back and I thought, I could have done this better. I could have tried harder at this. I could have done more of this. And I would be in a position where I was more fulfilled and fulfilled my potential. And mediocrity is exactly that, just in other terms, isn't it? In terms of you didn't get anywhere near what you were capable of.
But even mediocrity, people find a way to mitigate that term. Mediocrity is fucking disgusting. Let's call it by what it is. Mediocrity is fucking disgusting. And we need to think of it in these terms. You have one life. The chances of your existence is 1 in 4 billion. The fact that you were born into the West with the resources and the talent and the time that we have, you are one of the luckiest motherfuckers that have ever walked the earth. And you're going to do what? You're going to play video games. You're going to be overweight. You're going to do a job that's beneath you. That's what you're going to do with your one and only life. Fuck you. Fuck you. That's my mentality now. Fuck you. And don't get me wrong. If you want to change, I will help you. Like literally, come and move into my house. Yeah. I will mentor you. I will wake up at 4:30 with you every morning. When you need to cry, you can cry on my shoulder. I will hug you. I will do everything I can do for you. But if you've made the decision in your life that mediocrity is enough for you, then fuck you. Then fuck you. Because you have no use to anybody. You have no use to this society or to this culture. Because we don't need mediocre people. And I think David Goggins, you must know David Goggins, right?
Yeah, I love him.
Yeah, like David Goggins is a perfect example. David Goggins was not David Goggins 20 years ago. And this is what people don't get. Oh, I wish I could be like David Goggins. Or people say to me, I wish I could have your mindset. I'm like, dude, I wasn't this guy 10 years ago. I was weak and pathetic and inadequate. I've literally consciously built this person because I thought that this version of me currently is the best version I can be to navigate myself through the world. And David Goggins said on the Joe Rogan podcast, when Rogan asked him about his biggest fear, he said his biggest fear is that one day he'll face God, or whatever you want to call it. He'll face some kind of judgment. And he'll get to the front of that queue in the judgment, and there'll be a scroll there. And somebody will read this scroll, and it will say, David Goggins, ultra-marathon runner, international bestseller, world record pull-up, Navy SEAL 3 times. And David Goggins will look at him and say, no, that's not me. And God will say, that's who you were meant to be. That's hell. That's hell. And Voltaire, the great philosopher, when asked on his definition of hell, and this should strike fear into the heart of everybody, and he said his definition of hell is truth seen too late. Another thing we lie about ourselves. There's always time. There is always time. Hell is truth seen too late. Hell is going backwards and meeting the person you should have become. Hell is getting to 80 years old and being introduced to 20-year-old you and having to beg 20-year-old you for forgiveness because you fucked up who you could have been in pursuit of instant pleasure and pursuit of Instagram, and you sacrificed everything you could have had and been for laziness, And we need to be braver and say, fuck those people.
That's a powerful message and a powerful way for people to frame how they move forward. And it links a lot to having purpose. What are some of the ways that you, one, provide purpose for your staff at King Koby? And what are, secondly, how can others take that forward themselves as individuals?
That's a good question. I mean, purpose is responsibility. Yep. That's what purpose is. And there is every man, and this comes at different points in a man's life. But ultimately, and ironically, this is how you want to prevent suicide. This is how you prevent suicide. Is you need to find a purpose that transcends you. Something that transcends who you currently are, that is more important than you. That could be anything. You know, and a great example of that is when Tyson Fury beat Klitschko for the heavyweight championship of the world, 2015. He was a massive, I'm a huge boxing fan. Klitschko, Fury was a huge underdog for that fight. Huge, okay? Went to Germany, to the guy's backyard, played with him like he was nothing, like he was an amateur. Greatest achievement he'd ever made. 2 months after that fight happened, he spiraled into depression, went up to 300 pounds, was using prostitutes, was using cocaine, and he stayed in that dark place for 3 years. How is that possible? How is that possible that he just achieved the pinnacle, everything he'd worked for since he was 8 years old? And the reason that happened is because Tyson's Fury's life had no purpose. It had no meaning. What he had done is achieved an incredible goal. And once he got to that goal, well, now what? Because purpose and meaning are deeper than goals. We need goals, but purpose and meaning are deeper than goals. And your purpose should be, it's interesting, isn't it? Because people talk about the meaning of life, yeah? What's the meaning of life? Well, it's different for everybody. That's bullshit. It's not different to anybody. It's not different to anybody. If you're over the age of 18, the meaning of life is the same for everybody, unless you're going to tell me you never made a mistake. So I would say to you now, have you ever made a mistake in your life that you regret?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. There's your purpose. Go get redemption.
Yeah, I like that.
Go seek redemption. Go live your life so well that the mistake you made, or the person you hurt, or the girl you cheated on, or the thing you did that you're ashamed of, go and live your life so well that that man no longer exists. Go and banish that man to a graveyard. That's purpose. But to do that takes integrity. Yeah? And then you go down and down and down. And well, then how do you get integrity? Well, you get integrity by being self-aware. Well, how do you become self-aware? Well, you become self-aware by being brutally honest with yourself. Well, why are we not brutally honest with ourselves? Because it fucking hurts. Because it's painful to be brutally honest with you.
Because you look in the mirror and have to use terms like you used that hurt.
Hey, I look in the mirror. I had to look in the mirror. Look, when my daughter was born, okay, my daughter Juno, I'll probably start crying now, so you'll have to give me a second. When my daughter was born, she's 4 years old now, and me and her mum were going through a very difficult time when she got pregnant, and it just wasn't a pleasant experience, you know. And I regret that, and her mum regrets that. It was awful, but it took me a year to bond with her. A year. You imagine that? You know, I'm a good man. I'm a good father. It took me a year before I even felt comfortable to hold my own child. And I had to examine what it was in me that still had that malevolence and that monster stuff in me, you know. And now, you know, that's gone, and I learned a lot from that experience. And now, you know, she's a fucking nightmare, but I adore her. But my point is that it's only by accepting that you are not a good person. You're a fucking monster. You are an animal capable of extraordinary, evil, nasty, horrible things. And when you bring that under voluntary control, then you become an exceptional man. Then you become a great man, because the world has always been moved forward by men that were capable of that, but said, no, I could do that. I could leave. I could run. I could cheat. I could lie. I have that in me, but I won't. And I won't, because I recognize that it's not good for me or my family or my culture or my society. We have to reverse this. And actually, it turns out that the best way for you to operate in this world as a man is to be a monster, but to have that under voluntary control. Then you become someone exceptional.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible, Neil. That level of self-awareness, like you say, that ability to just like speak to yourself in that way, but then agree that you move forward despite this awareness of these dark impulses within you, these poor behaviors. You say, no, that's here, I'm aware of it, but my personal responsibility and for myself and for those around me to be the best man that I can be means that I will not take action on the poorer qualities within me. Instead, I will live with integrity.
Absolutely, and it's deep, and it also means, you know, I've got a huge thing about we use words that we don't understand. We use words all the time. We use words like love. We don't understand love. We use words like respect. You know, you ask somebody why they love their partner, you won't have to ask them more than twice before they stutter and run out of answers. Ask them to define respect. They don't really know. We don't really know. We don't explore these terms. We don't explore what does it actually mean to love somebody. What does it actually mean to have respect for somebody? You know, and we don't explore this language, which means we never get to the point where we're actually living that out into the world. You see what I mean? And it's like, I've lost my train of thought again. What did you say before while I was answering that? So
effectively, you've been able to take this high level of self-awareness, address how you see yourself, have the integrity to decide against the worst parts of yourself and take personal responsibility to move forward in the best possible way.
Yeah, exactly right. Thank you. Yeah, you put it back on track. So we innately, and I'm talking generally, okay, but this, you know, when I'm talking generally, I'm talking sort of, I believe this to be true for 95% of people. If you stopped, you know, 100 people in the street, 100 men, and said, "Are you a good man?" they would say yes. If you asked them to tell you why they were a good man, they would give you a list of things they didn't do. And that is deeply, deeply disturbing when you really break that psychology down. You say to a man, "Are you a good police officer?" "Yeah, I'm not a bad one." "Yeah. Are you a good father?" "I'm not a bad dad." "Are you a good husband?" "I'm not a bad husband." You know, "How's your podcast going?" "Yeah, it's okay. It's not bad." When the fuck did this become acceptable? When did it become acceptable to describe the most important roles in your life as not bad? When did that become acceptable? And that's what we do. We describe our goodness, not by goodness, but by the absence of a negative. Yeah. We are good because we don't do bad. And it's like, no, you are not good because you do not do bad. Goodness is a verb. It's an action. It's a doing word. You have to actively be good. You are not a good man by default. And people believe that they are. They believe that goodness is purely the absence of negative things, and it isn't. That's neutrality. And there is nothing worse than neutrality. I would rather live in a world of evil men than live in a world of neutral men, because neutrality is weakness. At least with evil men, you know where you stand. So you have to go down this path and say, well, I think I'm a good man, but am I? What do I do that's good? What do I do that's actively good? How often do I top up my goodness? What do I do to justify making such a bold claim as I am a good man? Because you are not a good man because you don't rape, steal, and murder. You see? And that's why we live in a world full of average, mediocre men, because they define their masculinity so poorly.
Where does fake morality lead into this, Neil?
Fake morality?
Yeah.
In terms of what? Expand the question for me.
So fake morality. So we've talked a little bit around virtue signaling on Instagram about mental health. We've spoken there about I'm a good man because I don't do bad. I'm a good man because I don't rape, steal, and murder. How does this link to masculinity and the kind of positive version of masculinity that we're trying to talk about today?
Well, because look, all of that is virtue signaling. All of it is virtue signaling. It's bullshit. I don't believe that people believe that. It's all virtue signaling. And I mean, look, let me give you an example. Virtue is something that is earned, okay? We are not naturally virtuous. Also, the idea that human beings are generally good is nonsense. There is no biological scientific evidence for that whatsoever. The idea that we are all equal is nonsense. The idea that we are all of equal worth is nonsense. The idea that you matter just as much as I matter is nonsense. And the idea that all life matters is nonsense. And they're too deep, we get into that, but nonsense. Let's start with that premise. Virtue is something that has to be earned. Okay, it can't just be claimed. So let's take, let me think. Okay, let's take Brad Pitt. Yeah, Tom Hardy. Let's take Tom Hardy. Universally recognized, one of the best looking men on the face of the earth. I can't think of a single woman that would not jump at the chance to get into bed with Tom Hardy. Okay, and then let's think of Piers Morgan. Okay, a guy that doesn't have those attributes, those physical attributes. So you have Piers Morgan here, you have Tom Hardy here. Both of those men have been married to the same woman for 20 years. both of those men have been, have not cheated. They haven't been, what's the word?
Faithful.
Faithful. Yeah, both of them have been faithful to their wife for 20 years. Both of them. They both get to claim the same virtue. But do they? Tom Hardy, every single day of his life, has had the world's most beautiful women throwing themselves at him, giving him opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to stray.
Yeah.
His virtueness has been tested. His faithfulness has been tested. Piers Morgan hasn't had a single opportunity to stray, but he's had the same outcome. Only one of those men is virtuous. Your virtue has to be tested. You're not virtuous by default, and you're not good by default. It has to be tested.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think, I don't know whether you're a component or a proponent or a kind of encourager of journaling, but I certainly have found that writing down my good deeds for the day has helped me reinforce the things that I've done positively, but also it's almost caused me to do more good deeds, and not just for the sake of virtue signaling, because nobody sees it. It's all kept to me. It's all internal. And I write down what I did today, who I helped, who I supported. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that kind of perspective for guys to be conscious of their positive actions.
Everybody should do that. And the reason, and there's a reason that we write and that we journal, and it's deep that people think. What do you have to do when you write?
Think.
You have to think. You go through most of your day and you don't have to think. We're autonomous. Almost everything we do is autonomous. When you sit down and it's just you and a book and a paper, you actually have to engage in critical thought. What did I do? Then why did I do it? What was the outcome of it? You have to think.
Yeah.
And the only way that you can achieve the outcomes you're talking about by being better and, you know, trying to do more good deeds is to think, to be engaged in critical thought. And that's why writing these things down is so important. In fact, writing is probably the only real tangible thing that gives us the ability to engage and practice critical thought.
Yeah, it's coming out for a year of me journaling, and I've used the template to do so, the 6-minute diary, and it's been extremely beneficial. But there's been times that have been genuinely quite painful what I've written on the paper. Because some days I've got to the good deed and I'm not sure what I've done that's good. And that's where it comes back to the whole fake morality piece. Yes, I view myself as a good person, but what have I done today that I can actually truly say was good? Sometimes nothing, or I have to rack my brain, which is painful because it's sore to not see myself as a positive influence.
Yeah, well, Nietzsche, you know, I don't know if you're a big reader of Nietzsche, but I am. He's taught me a lot. But you know, Nietzsche spoke about this a lot, and he spoke about weakness that was clothed as virtue.
Okay.
And all of this, that people's virtues that they claim to be virtues, they weren't virtues at all. They were just a way of hiding their weakness. It's not that, you know, I don't hit you, therefore I'm a good person. It's that I'm a coward. I would never hit you, but I claim it as a weakness, you know? And that's, your Instagram is full of that. Instagram is absolutely full of that. It's full of weakness and cowardice that's hidden as virtue, you know? And that's what virtue signaling is. You know, these people that, you know, they film themselves doing squat thrusters in their fucking living room because they think they're empowering people. You know, no, it's not. That's pure narcissism. That's pure narcissism. You know, and people get hurt when they hear that. It's pure narcissism disguised as virtue. And you know, people should, if you have the balls, so the guys listening, if you have the balls, go away and think about that. Go away and think about that. It's pure narcissism. And these things bring out the worst in us. They bring out the absolute worst in us. And then our minds are very clever, and we kid ourselves that we're doing it for positive reasons and for good reasons, you know. And we're not. It's pure narcissism. And it's but because something is done so frequently and by so many people, we forget that. You know, we go with common consensus. And don't ever go with common consensus. You know, you want a rule for life. Whatever the crowd is doing, do the opposite. I made that decision. When my mum died, I made a very, very, very deliberate decision when she died. I know exactly where I was when I made it. I made a very deliberate decision. And I said, I want to separate myself from the crowd as much as humanly possible. I don't want to look like them. I don't want to think like them. If they drink, I won't drink. I'm teetotal. I'll read the books they won't read. If they watch these programs, I won't. You know, when they sleep, I'll go to the gym. You know, I made a conscious decision to separate myself from the crowd and to separate myself from the masses, you know, and to become a free thinker and to question everything around me. And it's been the best thing that I've ever done for myself. And it also, it's not always easy because it means you're in a place where, half of the people think what I say is great and half of the people think I'm a scumbag. And that's good, because if everyone agrees with you, then guess what? You've never said a single thing worth saying.
You're better to filter your audience as well, because you'd rather be true to yourself and put out your real message than say things that a lot of people agree with, and you get a bigger following off the back of it, maybe a bigger appreciation for what you're saying, but you don't mean a word of it. And then you have to look in the mirror, and then who's the monster again?
It's the hardest thing. And look, and I'm as equally to blame. Like, I can't stand social media. I can't stand this Love Island culture. I hate it. And not only do I hate it, I'll go further. It makes it sound extreme. I genuinely believe that the culture that we have built is evil. I believe it's evil, and I believe that it will manifest itself in the next generation. Right? I think we have built a culture that is based on lies and deceit and manipulation and instant gratification and a lack of thought and instant pleasure and easy sex. And I think we're going to pay a huge price for that in the next 10 or 15 years. I can't stand it. But a year ago, I had to look at my own Instagram account and go, you're following quite a lot of porn stars, Neil. You're following quite a lot of bikini girls, Neil. And yet you hate this. I was part of the problem. I had blood on my hands, and I had blood on my hands, and I had to address that, and then it depends how much you want to break this down. And the biggest question that, especially as men, I think, because I think this is an issue for men to lead this culture, is how complicit are you in your own downfall? How complicit are you in the malevolence and the evil of your own culture? And it's a difficult question to ask, because that is a question that comes not from intelligence, but from wisdom. How much blood is on your hands? And I don't mean, I'm asking the men that listen, how much blood is on your hands? How complicit are you? How many selfies do you fucking take? How many pictures of your meals do you take? How complicit are you? How many of these bikini girls who do nothing but cause other girls to doubt their own beauty and significance are you following and double tapping? How complicit are you in this culture? Be brave enough to ask yourself that question, and then make some changes. And then guess what? Then you become a real man. Then you become a real person. And then you become someone with integrity, and it's difficult. It's difficult to do that. And it's a process. I had this conversation with the mother of my children.
Yeah.
Her initial argument was, like everybody would be, we want to defend ourselves, right? Anyone says something bad, like, whoa, no. And she's like, well, I don't put any pictures up of just me, not just a selfie. There's just pictures of me and my daughter, me and my son. I'm like, okay. So that picture there with you and our daughter, that picture's only there because you think you look good on that picture. But if you didn't think you looked good on that picture, you wouldn't have posted it. You've used the fact that our daughter's on that picture as a way of justifying posting a good picture of you. And the penny dropped. And she was like, you're right. If that wasn't a good picture of me, I wouldn't have put a picture there.
Yeah, it's incredibly challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, and it takes that level of sophistication and that level of honesty, to go, all these things that I thought were innocent, all of these things that I thought were mundane, that I thought weren't causing any harm, are actually destroying masculinity at its core, and they're destroying the culture that we've built. And I think this pandemic has proven that beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the most challenging conversations that I've had on the podcast, Neil, in terms of from my own perspectives, for the listeners' perspectives. So many different themes that we've gone through in terms of men's mental health, masculinity, being a coward, finding purpose, integrity, how we speak to ourselves, and especially around personal responsibility to a brutal level. One of the last things I'll ask you before asking where people can link in with you is, what are some of the sources and influences that have helped shape? I know you've said you're not a traditionally educated man, but you've delved into books and online. Where would you maybe direct people if they wanted to delve more into this subject?
Jordan Peterson changed my life.
Yeah.
Without any shadow of a doubt, Jordan Peterson changed my life. Now that is, I'm not a fanboy. I don't believe with everything that he says. But Jordan Peterson changed my life. He changed my life. And he changed my life in a way because when I first heard about Jordan Peterson, I heard him on the Joe Rogan podcast 5 or 6 years ago, before he became mainstream. And I disagreed with almost everything that he said. And for whatever reason, I felt prompted to go back. And it was a terrifying thing that I had to go, no, what he's saying is objectively true. I have to abandon my subjective view of the world. And the more I listen to him, and he talks a lot about personal responsibility. He talks a lot about adopting a level of manhood that is useful to you and to your family and to your partners, and why that is important. Jordan Peterson helped change my life. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, is a book that changed my life. It's a phenomenal book. That is a book about how to find purpose in the middle of the most brutal chaos.
Neil, just on that, if you like that book, have you read The Forgotten Highlander?
No, I haven't.
I'm going to ping you a link for that after this. You'll if you like Viktor Frankl, you'll like The Forgotten Highlander. It's about a gentleman that ended up, he served in the World War and he ended up as a prisoner of war in Japan. And he went through everything you could possibly imagine. That I won't go into it on this, but yeah, incredible book.
So all of these guys, and then Dostoevsky, the Gulag Archipelago. I mean, even that. Just quickly, this is a man who was in Soviet Russia in the 30s under Stalin and the Communist Party. He was a member of the Communist Party himself. He ended up in the Gulag Archipelago, right? So he ended up in the prison camp of the Soviet Union, and he had the fortitude. And this, and we talk about, this is courage beyond almost human comprehension. This is heroism beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
Is that he had the fortitude to sit there in the depths of despair, as close to hell as you can possibly get on earth, and not blame anybody around him, but have the heroism to say to himself, what did I do to get myself here? That's a question that every man listening needs to go and ask. Don't blame your wife, your girlfriend, your mother, your father. I don't care if you were sexually abused. I don't care if you saw horrific things in Iraq. I don't care if you've lost a parent. Because I say, what? I've been through all those things. I've been through all of those things. And when I say I don't care, I don't literally mean I don't care. But what I mean is, at some point, you have to look yourself in the mirror and go, so what? Because ultimately you have two choices. This is it. When you break everything down, you have two choices. Continue being the coward you are, end your life, or fix it. That's it. No more talking. No more excuses. No more you weren't there. No more I was abused as a kid. Okay, you were, that's terrible. But you're 35 years old now. How long are you going to keep saying that for? And I want men to have these conversations with men. And this comes from a place of love. And this is the thing other people understand. This is real love. And I don't know if you've heard of a guy called James Baldwin. Sorry, I know we're running out of time, but there's a guy called James Baldwin who was just a beautiful human being, a beautiful, beautiful human being. And he was a writer during the 50s and 60s, a black writer during the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
And, he has some amazing quotes, and he endured hell, in the southern states of America. But one of his most famous lines, and it's so beautiful and it's so true, and he says, if I love you, I have to make you aware of the things that you don't see.
Yeah.
And that's what love is. Love is not what we think it is. If you love me, brutalize me with the fucking truth. Because my life is short. Your life is short. Don't placate me. If you see me being less of a father than I could be, fucking tell me. If that means you have to get your hand down my throat and push me against the wall, you tell me the truth. Because life is too short to give each other false platitudes. And as men, we need to do this. What you're doing is not okay, bro. You could be more. I'm telling you because I love you. And we don't do that. We just don't do that.
Brutal honesty with each other.
Yeah. Look, if you're over 18 years old, if you're over 18 and you don't make money online, delete your fucking accounts. Delete all your social media accounts. Delete them all. Go to the fucking gym. Read some books. Pick a purpose. Pick a plan. Decide who you want to be. Work at it. Work at it all of the time. Be a man. Go and be a fucking man. Honor your masculinity. Being a man is an incredible thing. And this society teaches us that it's a bad thing. With toxic, all of these nonsense things. Men are the protected, and we should be. And I didn't take my masculinity seriously until I was into my 30s. And that's a huge regret of mine. It's an important, as a man, you have an important role in society. A hugely important role. And we have far too many of our young men right now who sacrifice that role. And they sacrifice it for dot work tattoos and yachts in Dubai and teeth whitening in Turkey and jawline filler. We need to find a way, and we can only do this from within our own group, for men to challenge other men, to think deeply about who they are and why they do the things we do, and then maybe we can reverse this terrible trend.
Neil, thank you for helping me think deeply today, for challenging myself and definitely many of the listeners as well. Where's the best place for people to connect with you? I know you hate social media, but if somebody wanted to message you off the back of this to maybe give you some of their thoughts or share their experience and ask for ways forward, where could they reach out?
They could just so we've got a King Koby Instagram page. I'm the guy that runs that. So if you send me a DM on there, it'll be me that opens and gets a DM. So anyone's welcome to do that. Even if people disagree with me, I get messages all the time. People disagree with me. I'm happy with that too. If you want to speak or reach out, or that's fine. Get in touch.
I'll link King Koby in the show notes below. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. Please take the opportunity to share this with a friend that might need to hear it, or within your group chat, to challenge the thoughts and the narratives that we have around masculinity, and tune into a conversation that Neil and I have had today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.